Hey, everybody. What is up? What is up? What is up? I think we are live. I never really know in the live stream when it actually starts to pick up, but what's up, everybody? Good to be here with you. I appreciate all of you showing up for today's stream. Ross, Isaac, Erica, Akos, Carol, what's up? What's up? Good to have all of you here. Randy, Evgeny, thank you all for showing up from all over the world for this stream. I always challenge myself. I say, today I'm going to make the best live stream that I ever did, and hopefully you're going to be a part of it. So thank you for showing up live. It's going to be super fun. You're going to learn a lot. We're going to interact in the comments. We're going to open up for Q&A at the end. So we're all looking up for a really fun hour together, and hopefully you'll benefit. You'll get a lot out of it. So with that said, I think let me go ahead and share my screen. This is going to be super practical today, so get ready to learn. First of all, let me give you a context why I call this workshop How to Finally Get Webflow. I assume that you've probably heard about Webflow all around. Everybody's talking about this, or you're just getting a lot of ads on YouTube, on Instagram. You're seeing Webflow, and then you're seeing all of these beautiful websites that people are creating, like award-winning websites, beautiful interactions, animations, and you're saying, I want part of that. Maybe you're on Twitter like me and you're seeing people are like, oh my God, there's so much work for Webflow. I'm doing so many projects. I'm fully booked. Oh my God, I'm making like 100K in a year just from Webflow project. And you're seeing all of this and you're overwhelmed. Now, when I shared this kind of stuff, I think 3 or 4 years ago, when I was saying like Webflow, do it, like I think maybe people didn't either believe me or they thought like I was lucky or something like this. But now you're seeing it all around you and you know that's true. So you're probably very excited. And let me guess what happened. You've probably opened up Webflow, so excited. I'm going to be part of this revolution, the cutting edge of design. And then you're like, oh my God, this is so difficult. Like, what is going on here? I don't understand anything. Why does it have to be so difficult? And now you're in this kind of like YouTube tutorial hell where you're trying to watch every video, everybody comes up and every tutorial, and you're like, you're feeling lost, you're feeling overwhelmed. And my goal with today's stream is to fix this, okay? So I want this live stream actually to be a game changer for you, okay? I want you to have so many aha moments that you actually get it, okay? So that's my goal. Here's what's on the agenda, and this is a lot, okay? Number one, I'm gonna share with you how Webflow actually works and like the mental models that you need to understand, or basically kind of like how to think like a developer so you finally get it. Then we're gonna talk about all the most important layout concepts in Webflow, and then we're gonna talk about responsiveness. We're gonna talk about what the hell is CMS and how to work with that. We're gonna talk about animations and how to animate, and I'm going to help you try to really fast track your learning into becoming a pro. And as I said, we're going to finish it up with a Q&A. And I think it's going to take about an hour to get this all done. So before we get started, some of you might know me from YouTube and around the web, but some of you are like, who are you? Like, what? Why are you talking about Webflow? Why should we listen to you? So let me just start off with like 2 words, 2 minutes, just share like my story and why I'm so excited about Webflow. So my name is Ran Segal. This is me with Vlad, actually the CEO of Webflow, like 3 or 4 years ago, with actually in the first kind of like major event where I was teaching Webflow, but actually I was teaching Webflow since 2014, which, oh my God, it's like 8 years. So here's actually the first email that I wrote Vlad telling him, and this is actually the first workshop that we had in 2014 when Webflow just came out. So we held these workshops in Tel Aviv, Israel, because I was freelancing and I immediately saw the impact on my business. And I was like, this is a game changer for designers. We have to, like everybody has to. I became an evangelist. I started talking about this all the time, starting touring around the world, teaching people how to Webflow, and got really excited about this. As I said, for me personally, as a freelancer, this is kind of like, I think maybe my last actual client project that I did within Webflow, which I think ended up charging like $50,000 for this is a really big project, like a big CMS website and like a 6 months project. But this was a really game changer for me, being able to do by myself like a 50K project and building it all by myself with Webflow, and then, training the team about this and all of that. It was a really great game changer. So that's kind of like my Webflow story. At this point, we have helped trained over 5,000 students with Webflow, and they were saying things like, I came from a print background. I couldn't quite understand how Webflow worked. I wanted to move into web design, but I was wasting a lot of time understanding the process of designing a website with Webflow. Nothing seems to work. Now I'm able to structure websites properly and build them quickly. I have more freedom, and I don't have to rely on developers to build websites with a limited platform like Wix. So I'm trying to get this to you today, and pardon my 90s reference or 2000s reference or my Matrix reference, but today I'm going to put a lot of information in your head. So I hope you're ready because it's going to be a lot. Let's get down to it. So let's start with how Webflow works. And I want to use a metaphor because I think it will help you kind of grasp things easily if it's if it looks like something that you already know. So I want to ask you this question, like, okay, what would, if building websites was like cooking, right? You have to make food. How would you think about this, or what would actually be your alternatives, right? So if you think to yourself like right now, okay, I need to make dinner. What are my options? So the first option that you have is to order food, right? You can call a pickup, Uber Eats or whatever. And to me, that is something like Wix or Squarespace, because at the end of the day, you're getting something that is pretty much packaged and ready for consumption. Yes, you can change it a little bit. You can tell them, hey, I want some pepperoni on my pizza. Make this spicy. Don't make this. You can make tiny adjustments, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like it is what it is, right? So that's one option for you when it comes to building a website. Now, on the complete other opposite of things is coding by hand, which I would compare, if we're talking about food, to growing your own food. Now, it takes a lot of work to grow your own food. Now, is it worth growing your own food? I mean, I guess if you think about, the best restaurants in the world, like Michelin restaurants, top chefs in the world, they probably grow their own food. They have their own gardens and they take care of it, and they make a lot of effort to do that. And that helps them reach quality that's probably not accessible for most of us. But the honest truth is, do you need to do this? Not everybody needs to do this. Not everybody needs to grow their own food. It's a lot of work. It's dirty. It's like, it's a lot of effort. So, and this is how I see coding websites by hand. Yes, it's great. You can do that. You'll be able to achieve great quality, but it's a lot of maybe wasted effort for you. Where I see Webflow is, I think about Webflow as like the most amazing grocery store in the world. So what does that mean? Means it has all the fresh ingredients that you can go there and you can decide what you want to cook, and you'll be able to cook anything. You don't have to be limited in kind of like a pre-made food like you have in Wix or Squarespace or something like this. You also don't have to go and grow your own food, right? You have the great ingredients ready for you, and you can basically make up almost anything, right? If you know how to pick the right ingredients and you know how to cook them, you can do anything. So this is kind of, first of all, like a mental model for you to understand, in the space of alternatives, what is Webflow? Webflow gives you access to all the ingredients, right, that are available in web development, and then you can do pretty much whatever you want with them. Okay, but what are the implications of this metaphor? The implications are that you need to know how to cook, right? Because when you're ordering food, you don't really need to know how to cook, right? You just call them, send me 2 pizzas. You don't really need, it's very easy, right? But when you're trying to cook your own food, when you're trying to cook something delicious, you need to know how to cook. So this is where I think a lot of designers struggle, is because they go into it, they open up the Webflow designers thinking like, it's just going to be as easy as a Wix or a Squarespace. But no, it's not. It's completely different. You need to know what you're going to. You need to know what ingredients you want to use. You want to know what you're going to prepare with them. So that's where I think there's a little bit of a learning curve. So that's what I'm going to help you with. We're going to talk about what are the ingredients that we have to work with when we're building websites, and also what are kind of like the cooking methods, like how do we prepare them into something that's tasty and valuable? So let's get started with the number one most important ingredient in web design or web development, and that is called the div block. The div block. Now, what is a div block? Maybe you've heard this term, maybe you don't. A div block is basically, it's essentially like a box, okay? And it's like a mental box. And let me give you an example for you to understand what I mean. So here's Apple's website. Now, if you go ahead and right-click on your Chrome and do inspect, you'll see actually the code of the website. Now, here you can see there's a bunch of things that are called div. And then if I hover on top of them, you can see that whenever I hover on top of one of them, you see a box in the left-hand side, and that marks this div is actually a box that has some content within it. Now, some of these boxes contain text, other contains buttons, other contains images, but these are just boxes inside of boxes, and the whole content is kind of like boxes nested inside of each other. Now, the other thing you might note if you're looking at the code here is that each of these divs have something after it that's called class, and then it says module content or unit wrapper or something like that. The class is actually the name of the div, and we'll talk about that in a second. So what can we put inside of these boxes? Well, we can put the other ingredients that we have, ingredients like text elements or images or videos or links or buttons or forms, or we can put boxes inside of other boxes, right? We can nest them inside of one another. So that's the key ingredients that we're working with, right? The div block, and then these other, let's call them sub ingredients that we're putting inside of the div block. So what do we do with that? Like, okay, we've got ingredients. How do we cook them into something meaningful? So the first cooking method, or the first thing that I want to talk to you about, is the styles. We've already seen this, right? Because each of one of these names had a name, right? It says class equal to something, and that something was the name of the div. That's how we identify them and we give them meaning, right? And then once we have a name, we can say, okay, everything that is called this thing, like unit wrapper, has some kinds of definition. It has a specific definition for the size of it. Maybe it has a definition of the fonts of the content inside of it, maybe the color of the text or the color of the background, maybe how it is spaced or where it should be positioned on the page. How does it interact with other things? So that's how we define the class of this div. All right, it was a bit theoretical, but to make this workshop a little bit more fun, let's start off with a demo. So I'm going to jump right into Webflow. Before I'm jumping into Webflow, I actually want to jump into Figma. I have this very, very simple design of a UI that I have here. And if you want to follow along with me, I linked the both Figma file and the assets below this video, so you can work alongside with me right now. So let's say I want to build this kind of card. Okay, so I'm jumping into Webflow, and right here on the left side panel, I have add element, and you will see that one of the first things that we have here is a div block. Actually, most of the other things that we have here are just variation of the div block or a div block that already have some parameters into it, but this is going to be the first thing or major thing that we're going to use again and again. So let's try to create this thing. So what do we have here? We have a box, right? Inside that box, we have an image, and then we have like the name of the piece of art. By the way, these are not my artwork. These are from Unsplash. Then we have two text elements, and then we have a button. So let's try and create that. I'm going to put a div block right in here, and you can see that we have a box, but it's empty. Now, before I'm going to style this, how this looks, I actually want to bring in all the elements. So first of all, let me go here into the assets panel, and I'm going to go ahead and upload these images that we have here. I'm going to upload all these images so that we have them here in the panel. So we have a box, a div block. Let's put in an image inside of it. So I'm throwing in an image. And then we have two text elements. So let me go into the add panel and take a text block, put it inside. And let's call this, let's say, I'm going to copy the text abstract number 1. And then abstract number 1. And let's copy and paste this so we have two elements. And this is going to be new art. And so we have these. And you can see here, you can see with this little tiny rectangular that these things are nested inside of this div block. They are a part of it, and I can collapse it. So they are basically inside of this div block. The last thing I want to add is a button. So I have here already a button element ready. I'm going to take that and drag it inside as well. You can see, this button is currently not inside of the div block, but I'm going to drag it inside because I do want it inside. Okay, now that we have all these elements, let's make them look like this element. So first of all, let's start off with the size of it, because you can see right now that the size of this thing spans through the whole page. So to start designing it, we're going to have to give it a style. So right here on the right side, we have the styles panel. And now it's asking us to give this a class name. So let's call this, I'm going to call this card dash wrapper. Wrapper is a word that we're using a lot in web development. It's basically a box that wraps things inside of it, right? So this is a card wrapper, let's call it. And let's start defining it. So we have a width. I can go into Figma and click this thing to see that this is, let's say, 350. So let's go ahead to the width and say 350. Okay, now you can see that the box has changed its size. That's nice. What else do we have? First of all, this box has color, right? It has some fill color. So let me copy the color. And let's go here into, scroll down a little bit. We have backgrounds. Now I can add some images. I can add a color. So I'm just going to paste the color in here. Now you see that this box is now gray. Now you can note that all of the text inside of it, well, not all of them, but one is white and one is kind of grayish. Now, if I'm going to go here and I have typography, I'm going to change that to white. You can see that everything that is inside of it, all of these elements inside of it, are being affected. So now these elements are white as well. What else do we have here? We have a little bit of spacing, right? You can see that the content, both text and images, are not touching the edge of the box. And that's because we have some inner spacing. And then also we have some spacing from the outside as well, right? We're not touching the edge of the page. So right here at the top, you see that we have spacing. And you can see that we have space outside of the box. You can literally see a box here, which is called margin. And then we have space inside of the box, which is called padding. So I can click this and start dragging it. And you can see as I'm dragging the margin at the top, it's being pushed down. Now I can hit Option and Shift to add space from all sides. Now you can see that all sides are being pushed at the same time. And if I'm going to just hover on top of it right now, you can see these blue outlines representing that there is space outside of the box. There is 21 pixels of space outside of the box from all directions. Let's also add padding, space inside. And now you can see there's, let's say, 25 pixels. Now you can see that there is equal spacing from the top, from the left side, right side as well. Okay, so starting to look good. Now we can see that there's also round corners, and I can see here in Figma there is 20 pixels of round corners to this element. So let's go ahead and pick the card wrapper, scroll down here into the borders, and there's radius. I can put here 20, and that's pretty much looks like that. Now let's go ahead and style the elements within it. So the image also has some round corners. So let me click the image. Let's call this image and go here and give this radius as well. Now we have this is, let's call this art name. Let's say art name. And this, I would probably check to see which font size this is. So this is Open Sans 20 pixels. So I can go into typography and say, well, this is Open Sans and this is 20 pixels. And I also want a little bit of spacing from the top and the bottom. And this is actually probably also semi-bold. I'm going to add a little bit of space from the top, which is margin top, just the top. And then a little bit from the bottom, which is margin bottom. Here I don't need from left and right. New art. Let's call this description. And we can see that this is gray. So let's call this description. Don't mind my typos, and just change the type color to this gray, give it a little bit more spacing. And then we have this button, which we can call button. And by the way, this button is supposed to say buy. Now what do we have here? We have this color with 16 pixels, round corners, and a font that is 20 pixels and is bold. So let's go here, pick the button, go to the background color, paste in our color. For the typography color, I'm going to set it to black, and then also put it as, what was it? Open sans, bold, and 20, I think it was. And then also we had, I think, 16 pixels of corner radius. Now here we need a little bit more spacing, I think, from left and right. So let's add a little bit of padding, and I can just hold the Option key. Then it's going to add just from left and right. It's not all sides. Option and Shift is from all sides, which is not what I want, and just symmetrically is using the Option key. So let's say this is pretty much what we want. This is also should probably be capital letters. So we have here more option, capital letters. So this pretty much looks like it should look like. I'm going to make this smaller a little bit. So basically, we have our card designed pretty much like our Figma. One thing that we might want to do is also change the background to black. So here, or not black, but you can see that the background is this very dark gray. So we can go into the body, and body is just a box, just like any other box. So I can go ahead here into the background and change its background to this dark color. And we pretty much have this design of the card almost ready. But I think we can, for now, we can continue to the next concept. So let's talk more about layout. And here's where a lot of people get this wrong. A lot of people who are used to playing around with design software, whether it is Figma or Photoshop or XD or whatever your favorite design software of choice is, design software have this concept of layers, right? And so we stack layers, and what's on the top is on top of other things, and we can move things around how we want them. But this is not how the web works, and this is not how Webflow works, right? Webflow actually works, or web browser actually more works like this, like a Google Doc, where basically things don't go on top of one another, things push each other, so there is enough space for everything. Now this kind of sucks, but then you're asking yourself, well, so how do they create these things, right? Where things are rotated, things are on top of one another. How do they do this? How do they rearrange these things? Okay, and so now we're getting into a little bit of a more advanced layout concept. They are super, super important to grasp, so stick with me. So the third thing I want to cover is the flex box, and this is a super important cooking method because you're going to use this to manipulate all of your objects and all of your ingredients. So far, we have this card element that we have here. Now, what would happen if I would copy and paste this 3 times? Can you guess? All right, let me try. Copy, paste, 1, 2, 3. Well, they're here, one after another. Now, you might have thought to yourself, well, if this was Figma, right? If I go in Figma and I take this card and I copy and paste it 3 times, first of all, it's just pasted on top of it, so I don't even see it originally. But then maybe you thought they're going to appear one next to each other because there's enough space here on the left, but no, this is not how Webflow works. This is not how the web works. So by default, and you can see these elements, if you go here into the layout panel and you look at, we have here something that's called display. And natively, these elements are set to be display block. And you can see here, Webflow gives you a hint, and they basically say a block element starts from a new line and takes up the full available width. So basically, although this is only 350 pixels in width, it's actually taking up the whole space. And then it's being pushed, the other things are being pushed to the next row. So this is kind of limiting, and this is not what we want. And this is where Flex, which is called Flex and sometimes called Flexbox, is very, very powerful. So right now, this is what we have, right? We have 3 elements. They're stacked one on top of one another. But maybe we want them to be stacked one next to each other. And maybe we don't want them to just, align to the left. Maybe we want them to span up through the whole thing. or maybe we want them to just be centered. So there are a lot of ways to play around with 3 elements inside of a box, right? And this is what, in essence, Flexbox does, and that allows you tons and tons and tons of different layouts if you understand how to use this and how to manipulate these objects. So let me give you a demo. The way that the Flexbox works is that you do not apply it to a single element, but you put the elements inside of a wrapper, inside of a box, and then you decide what will happen with these elements. So let's give this a try. Let's create a box and call this box items wrapper, and let's put all of the cards inside of this. So to start with, nothing happens, all right, because nothing happens. But if I go ahead and change this items wrapper here from display into flex, then now all of a sudden I get this new, first of all, things have changed. All of a sudden they're one next to each other. But now we also have this interesting UI here that explains how the objects that are inside of items wrapper are going to be organized. First of all, are they going to be organized horizontally or vertically? Previously, they've been organized like this, vertically, but now they've changed to horizontally. But now we can toggle them. Now, the next thing that we're asking here is, and let's say that I want this items wrapper to take up the whole, the whole screen. So I'm going to go here into the height and put 100 VH, which stands for vertical height, which is basically just telling the whole screen. So now, basically, items wrapper is trying to, by default, stretch the elements inside all of the space that it has available, so from top to bottom. But this is not what I want. I want them to be aligned to the top, or maybe I want them to be aligned to the bottom. You can see I can align them to the center, or maybe align them to the bottom. So whatever I want, now I can align them, and I can also justify them. By default, they are justified to the left, but maybe I want them in the center, or maybe I want them to the right, or maybe I want them to be spaced equally between, or something like that. So now you see how many alignment options we have here for these elements now that we are using the flex option. Okay, and this is super, super powerful to create, as I said, a lot of different elements. So this is one thing to really dive into and explore how to use this. Okay, so this is the flex. We still didn't cover how to put things on top of other things, okay? And for that, we need to talk about position settings. I see I mixed up the numbers here. So what does position setting means? So we've seen that by default, things are being stacked one after another. They're not going on top of one another, and they're taking up space. Now, even if I would go here into, let's pick one of these cards, and let's say I want to just move that card, or maybe I want to hide this card. So I'm going to give this, I'm going to call it add a class, which we call modifier class 2, to this card 2, because I don't want, otherwise if I make changes to this card, for example, if I change the color, you will see that all cards are being affected. Why? Because they're all using the same class. Now I want to make only card number 2 a little bit different. So I'm going to add card number 2. And now I can make changes that are only affecting this card, because only this is card number 2, and I'm making the changes to card number 2. So let's say I want to hide this, right? I can go down here into the bottom and I can remove the opacity. But note, although I've hidden this, it's basically still here. It takes up place. It's not like this thing moved to replace it. It's still there. Now, even if I want to move it somehow or rotate it, and you can see here I have 2D and 3D transformation, and I can click this and I can move things around. Maybe I want to move it up or move it down, or maybe I want to move it like this. But whatever I'm doing, even if I move this like this, you can see that it still takes up the place as if it's here, right? Even if I move this completely out of the way, right? Completely out of the way. Webflow and the browser still think that this element is right here in the middle. These other elements are not affected. Okay? So why does this happen? And how do we work with that to our benefit? So by default, things behave the way that I just showed you. And if we move them around, which is called relative, you can see, and I've left here number 3 kind of like in opacity, that you can see that, as I said, Webflow still treats it as if it is in its original place. But we have other options. So one option is called absolute. And if we change to absolute, note what happened. All of a sudden, number 3 does not exist anymore in the normal plane of things. So number 4 jumped right up to take its space. It's no longer taking space in the normal stream of elements. Now it's on top of it. And this is very, very powerful because this is how we're going to create kind of layering effects. And I'll show you in a second how this works. Now we have another positioning, which is called fixed. And fixed, you're probably very familiar with this because this is always what we do for navigation. Fixed means it's not in the stream of elements. It's not taking up physical space, but it's also always on screen, even if you're scrolling, even if you're moving around. So this is why it's very, very useful for navigation. You know this from a lot of sites. You scroll, but the navigation is staying fixed on the top no matter how much you scroll. So these are different position options, which you can find here under position. You see by default, this is static. And now we have these different options here. We also have sticky, which I didn't get to, but it's a little bit more advanced, so we don't have to cover this right now. Now, if we have relative, I have these. I have this option here to move things around, and it's pretty similar to what I just did before with the transform. But let me show you how absolute positioning works. Now we have this kind of like heart icon or like icon on top of the image. How do we put this on top of the image? So let me show you how we're going to do this. So to do this, first of all, we need to create some kind of a wrapper, right? To put this context, to put both the image and this icon thing inside of a box together so that we can group them. It's kind of like creating a group. So let me take this div block. I'm going to put the image inside. I'm going to call this image wrapper. And let's go ahead and create this icon thing. So I have here an icon. And let me just drop this in here. And I can go ahead. Let's call this icon. And let's style this. I actually don't need the circle. What I need is I need to add a white background and add a little bit of kind of like padding. So basically what we have a box. The icon itself is the box, and it has a space between the content itself, which is the image, and the bounding of the box. And now let's just give it a lot of round corners, maybe like 100 pixels. So it looks like a circle, but it's actually just a box with a lot of round corners. So that's a nice little trick here. But as you can see, this whole element is not on top of this image. It's actually after the image. So how do we do this? So what we want to do is we want to use the absolute position that I just showed you in the presentation, which basically takes it off the normal flow of elements. So I'm going to go ahead and for the icon, I'm going to go here into the positioning and I'm going to change it to absolute. Now note what happened. It's just jumped. So first of all, it's not here anymore, right? It's not taking up the space between the image, but it jumped into kind of like a random position. Now, you can see here in the absolute position that it says here relative to body. So every time we're using the absolute positioning, we want to position it relative to something else. And in this case, I want to position it relative to this image. And that's why I've put it inside of this image wrapper. So to do that, to make sure that we can make it relative to it, we need the parent of this icon, which is the parent is the box that it lies within. So this image wrapper, we need to change it from position static into position relative. And now if I pick the icon again, you can see that now it's relative not to the body, but it's relative to the image wrapper. Now, how does this help me? Because you can see here these little icons that we have here. So I can align it to the bottom right of the image, which is almost what I want. So I can add a little bit of space here and a little bit of space here. And basically, this is what I want, right? It's now on top of the image and it's relative to it. So if the image is a different size, it's always going to be fixed pretty much to the bottom right corner of this image. Now let's go ahead and remove the opacity a little bit of the background and also create this kind of glassy effect by going into filters, blur. Maybe it's here in the backdrop filter, blur. Okay, so now it's blurring the background, but we can't really see it right now. But let me see if I'm adding it. Well, we can't really see it. Maybe on a different image later, we'll see it a little bit more. Okay, so you've already done a lot, by the way. You're already pretty advanced at this point if we're doing absolute positioning and stuff like that. I'm going to take a drink and you can let me know in the comments how you're liking the stream so far and if you're learning a bunch of stuff. All right, looking good, looking good. Okay, thank you for asking questions. I see we have Kabarza from our team answering questions in the comments. So thank you so much. Feel free to keep asking questions. And let's go ahead and continue. So the next topic I want to talk about is responsiveness, okay? Because obviously everything that we need to create these days is going to be visible on mobile phones, tablet. We never know the size of the device of our users. So this is something that whatever we build, we have to make sure that it's being responsive. So here's a few notes that are important to know about how to think about responsiveness. Number one, you don't have to be fixed, right? So far, we've used, for example, for the size of the card, 350 pixels. But we don't always have to use pixels. We can use relative sizes like percentage or things that are relative to the size. We have used 100% viewport height, which is relative to the size of the browser of the users. So by using these kinds of measurements, and I'll show you them in a second, we can create designs that are adapting into the specific situation in which they are in. And this is very, very important. So this is the first concept that you want to remember. The second concept is who makes the rules? Like what things affect other things? And here I want to give you an example. So you can think about this in, for example, in United States, let's say the country or the federal whatever creates a bunch of rules. And all of these rules affect all the states within the country and all the cities within the country. Now, sometimes different states can override some of these rules or make rules that are specific only to them, right? They're not going to affect different states, so they're not affecting the whole country, but they are, if a state makes a decision, it does affect all the cities within the state. And then sometimes cities can make local decisions for the cities. Now, these are not going to affect other states, and they're definitely not going to affect the whole country. But what I'm trying to tell you here is that there is kind of like a top-down approach where big decisions affect everybody, and smaller or local decisions can override some of them, but they will not affect everybody else. And this is the same in when we're thinking about responsiveness. So the big thing, kind of like the whole country, is basically the size of the screen, right? So desktop. So all the decisions that we made in desktop, and when I say decision, I mean everything that we defined in classes. So the sizes of things, the font size, the colors, all of these things will affect by default all other screen sizes, smaller screen sizes like tablet and mobile. Now, if you want to make an adjustment and you make the adjustment on tablet, it's going to affect everything that's smaller than that. That would be mobile, but it will not affect decisions made on desktop, on things that are kind of like higher on top of it. And this is also true for classes, right? If you make definitions for the whole page, right? And we did make definitions like changing the background of the body. So the body is the whole page. If we set the font, for example, or the font color on the page, it's going to affect all the divs within it. Now, if for a certain div we want to override this decision, we can. And then everything that's inside of this div is going to be affected, but that's not going to affect either other divs or the page itself. So I hope that makes sense. If not, let me just give you a quick demo and we'll see how this looks. So right now we have, first of all, let's start with the body, right? So, and see how everything is being affected. So right now, the body has mostly what we did for the body is set the color, but we can also go ahead and change the font size, right? Oh, or not the font family, right? So here I can choose Open Sans. Now here specifically, I made the decision to change to Open Sans, but let me just remove this just so like we can see that if I make a change on the body to the font, you can see that now all the fonts throughout the page are being affected, right? And let's keep Open Sans, but let's now go ahead and just make a change here in card number 2. So now I'm making changes to the font in card number 2, and you can see only this specific card is being affected. Other cards are not being affected. So this is how decisions are trickling down from the body element into the div, into things that are inside of it. Now we were talking about responsiveness, and you can see here at the top, we have the different screen sizes. So right now I can go ahead and switch to tablet, for example, and you can see that basically everything looks the same, but it's crammed. And it's not necessarily, doesn't necessarily look good, especially as we go down. It's like, this really doesn't look good. So let's try to, first of all, make some adjustments, right? So number one is I've told you that we don't have to use fixed sizes, right? We have here pixels, but if I'm clicking on this, you see that I actually have a lot of other options here. Now I'm not going to dive into all of them today because it does get a little bit too complex, but let's talk about percentage. I can go here into percentage and maybe change this to, let's say, right now it's on 46, but the reason that it's actually not 46 because you can't fit 3 things that are 46 is because this Flexbox, this item wrapper Flexbox is trying to condense everything all together and not wrap the children. Wrap means, let it flow into a new line. But if I change this to allow this to flow into a new line, now you see that they actually have been broken down into a new line. And now I can go ahead and change, how, if it's too big, it's going to break into a new line. But if it's smaller, it can fit multiple items. Now, here's the beautiful thing. Now that we are in percentage, if I'm changing the size, you can see that the cards are actually changing together with the screen size because they are not fixed. They are actually, relative. And then, okay, so we have this. Note that this design is not affecting this design. Let's see what's going to happen here. Maybe here I don't want it to be 40%. Maybe I want this to be 100%. Well, this actually doesn't look good. So maybe 70%, maybe 70%, but here I see that we need to set the image here to be 100% width because the image, I guess, is not big enough. Okay, so this looks good. So now the card is 70% or maybe 80% and taking up the whole space. It did not affect the tablet and it did not affect the desktop. So things are, cascading down from the big into the small one. If I'm going to say, well, you know what, this button is a little bit too big on mobile, so let's go ahead and change the font size from 17 to maybe 15, and let's make the button maybe a little bit smaller, right? Maybe we don't need it to be that big on mobile. It's still going to be big. It's still going to be 17% when we're back in desktop. So I hope you figured out these two concepts. Number one, relative sizes. And number two, things are cascading down. All right, let's progress. I hope it's not too much. We've got 2 more things to cover. Number one is the CMS. Now, what is the CMS? CMS basically means this. Some of the content on a website, let's say like the major headline or something like this is basically just text. It's static. If your client wants to edit it, they can edit it. But some content, they not only want to edit, they also want to create new content. And examples for that can be blog posts. So you're not just going to give them a website with 2 blog posts and they're going to edit the blog post in terms of change the text. No, they want to create new blog posts. They want to create new pages with these contents. Maybe they want to add products to their page. Maybe they want to add team members. So for that, we need to create some kind of a dynamic database that clients can add more information to. And we need to design some kind of a template that knows how to deal with the data that's in this database. And here's an example. So here we have a design that's featuring maybe like an artist. So what you see here is that for the design in the background, we have all of these properties in the database, like what is the name of the album? What is the description of the artist? What is the picture? Is there a video for this? What is the rating for this? Are they featured or not? So there's a lot of parameters that the clients can input, and based on that, we're going to display this content on our website. Now, the way that clients update this is basically like they're creating a form, and then they're clicking create, and then it adds another item. So let me show you how this looks like. So in our website, let's say this is a gallery, right? And it's not, right now we have three artworks here, but maybe there are going to be 4 artworks or 5 artworks or something like this. So we want our clients to be able to add as many artworks as they want. So the way that we create this is we go to the CMS right here from the panel and we create a new collection. Now for us, let's call this collection artworks. And let's think about what parameters do we need. So what parameters do we have here? We have a name for the image, right? And so by default, anything has a name, and that's plain text. That's great. We also have, the image itself. So let's go ahead and add a field that is an image. Okay, and call this the image. Let's save this field. What else do we have here? We have this description, which is another text, right? So let's go ahead and add another plain text and call this description. And this is a single line of text. This is great. And now here on the right, you can see this is going to be the form that our clients are going to fill in to add new artworks. What else do we have here? We have the buy button. So maybe if this was e-commerce, there would be a price for this, but maybe we have like, yes, no. So maybe that's kind of a switch. No, I don't know. That's probably something that the user works. So let's say this is the information that we needed in the database. We need a name of the art, we need a description, and we need the image itself. So that's basically it. It's a pretty simple database. So now I'm going to create collection. And now I need to create some items so that we can work with. So let's go ahead and actually create them. So this is, let's call this abstract 1. Let's upload the image. And then what is the description? This is my latest artwork. Okay, so this is the first item in our database. Let's create 2 more. This is image 2 and upload image 2. And this is going to be, I did this last month. Now you can think about this as your portfolio projects, or you can think about this can be a lot of things, used for so many things. And this is painting 3. And then description, I didn't really create this. Okay, so now we have a database, and this database has 3 items within it. Let's see how we're going to use this. So here inside of, if I'm going to the add panel, I can go ahead into the CMS and add a collection list. So let's throw this here inside and see what happens. So first of all, it tells me to connect it. It wants to know what kind of a database am I going to connect it to. Now I only have one that's called artworks, and I'm going to click this. So now you can see I have 3 items here, just because I have 3 items. But if I'm going to open up this this box, because it's essentially a div block, we can see that we have a collection list wrapper, then we have a collection list, and then we have an item. but we only have one item. And that's because we are going to design just one template, and then this template is going to be applied to all different elements in this collection or in this database. So let's actually take one of these cards. Let's take this card wrapper and put it inside of this image. And we're just going to go ahead and delete these wrappers, these other elements. And yeah, now it's basically, because the item wrapper is trying to turn this into a flex box. So let's just put this and call this items wrapper. Turn this into the flex box. No, sorry, not this. Okay, this collection list is going to be the flex box that organizes these 3 boxes inside. So this was items wrapper. Okay, got it. So it's basically the same structure that we have before. Items wrapper is a flex box that organizes all the items inside of it, which is collection item. Now we have these elements, and now I want to connect them to the database. So I'm going to click on the image, and from here, you can see that I can replace the image from the database. So I'm going to get the image from our image field, and note when I selected it, each one of these elements got now the correlated image from the database. Now let's go ahead and take the name, connect that to the database. Now it's asking me what field do I want to connect it to, right? So there's name, there's description. It also has some that it created by default, like created on and stuff like that. Let's connect this to the name, and then let's connect this into the description. Now basically what you're seeing here is a representation of the data that we have in our database. We have 3 different images. We have the titles that I gave them, and we have the descriptions that I gave them. And basically, if my clients would now go on and say, hey, I have a new artwork, then you can say, okay, edit. So this is artwork number 4, and maybe they have a new image for it. And then new. They're just going to click this, and bam, the design is going to be updated with a new artwork. Now in this specific case, maybe we need to wrap them so we don't have too many items in one line. But now you can see that infinitely they can add more items to our website. And our job as designers is to design the template or the holders and the containers of this data. And this is a super, super important concept, and it's very useful, and it allows you to build a very, very powerful website when you're using the CMS. Okay. There's one more important thing that I want to cover. I hope that it wasn't too much for you. I want to talk about animations because I know how much people are excited about animations and how important it is to create great animations for your website. So there are 3 types of animations that basically are available in Webflow or on the web. No, not on the web, in Webflow, I would say, that I'm going to cover today. Number 1 is very, very simple style animation, which are called CSS animations. Then we have a more complex trigger-based animations. And then we have something that's called Lottie animations. Let's dive through them in an example one by one. So let's start with simple interaction. So when I choose something like the button, any element has multiple states by default for the style. So this one has a class of button, right? And if I click this down triangle, you can see that it has multiple styles. We're currently on the none state, but by default, it has also an hover state. Hover is what happens when, you hover with your cursor on top of it. So if I click the hover, now you can see that we get this green class, and now we're basically just changing up the class. So let's say that when people hover on top of this, maybe the color changes. Maybe it changes from this teal into these, I don't know what, pink. Let's go ahead and see this. So now you can see that I have this element. When I hover on top of it, the color changes. So this is first of all, this is an interaction, right? Now, it's not an animation, but let me show you, we can transition between this state, between the normal state and the hover state. And the way that we do this, I'm going to click the button, is we go down here into the bottom into transitions. Now, in this case, I want to animate the thing that is changing right here at the background color. So if I go here into background color, now it's going to animate, and the transition is going to happen in 200 milliseconds. I'm going to make this longer just so that it will be nicer to see. And now you can see when I'm hovering on top of it, actually, let me just preview this. Now you can see it's kind of like fading in nicely, and it's basically a type of animation, right? Now we can completely go crazy with this. Like, for example, maybe we want, when we hover on top of it, maybe we want the button to also be a little bit longer and the type to, have a little bit more letter spacing, right? So now we have all of these elements. So we want to add them as transitions. Now, because I'm lazy to add all of these different transitions, I'm just going to go here in transitions, all properties, animate all of them. And now let's see what happens when I preview this. Now you can see this button is completely jumping around. The padding is changing. The letter spacing is changing. So now we've created this very, very simple animation. Okay, ready to go into something a little bit more advanced? Okay, right here on the last panel, it's called interaction. Here we can create some more advanced stuff. So let's say that maybe I want this icon to maybe jump around when we click it, okay? So I click this and then I add some kind of an interaction. I have to choose what trigger happens. What happens to trigger this animation? In this case, let's do a mouse click. So when a mouse click, what happens? Let's start an animation. And let's create a new animation. Let's call this button animation. And we can say, for example, that when I'm clicking this button, maybe the button rotates. So let's go ahead and rotate this. Let's rotate this 360 degrees over 1 second. I don't know. Let's preview this. So right now, here's what's going to happen. When I click it, it's just going to rotate like this. It's a little bit of boring rotation. So let's do maybe something like bounce. Okay, so here's what's happening now. It's rotating and bouncing a little bit. Let's save this. And let's preview this, and I'm clicking, and I'm clicking, and now I can, now I can create some really fancy stuff because I only did one thing, which is to rotate this, but you can see that I can animate all of these different properties. I can move this around, I can rotate this, I can scale this, I can change the opacity, I can make things appear and disappear, and using this, we can create pop-ups, we can create a lot of fancy interaction, and this is very, very powerful. Once you understand the combination between the trigger, the thing that's causing the animation, and then what do you want to change? What are the properties that you want to change? This is how you create very, very powerful animations. Now, the last thing that I want to show you is called Lottie animation. And Lottie animation is basically just how you export a more complex animation, like an After Effects animation, and bringing it into Webflow. Now, I'm not going to create an animation in After Effects right now, but there is a super useful site called lottiefiles.com, which has thousands of very cool animations already ready-made for you that you can just download. All of these super cool animation. Let me search for heart or something like this, just because we have this heart thing going on there. So now you can see we have all of these very cool animation. Let me take this one, for example. Now I can download it as it is. I can also do like cool things like actually edit it, like change the color palette of it. But I'm not going to go into it right now. Let me just download this as it says here, Lottie JSON. God damn it, I need to log in for a second. All right. All right, so I have this animation. Let's go ahead and download it. And okay. So now I can go ahead and go into my Webflow website, go into my assets, and upload this Lottie file. It's right here. So these files are called JSON files, and they're basically just a little bit of script. Now I've uploaded it, and you can see when I'm hovering over here, you can even preview this animation. So let's go ahead and actually replace this icon. Let's replace this thing with, I'm going to go here into Lottie. I can't replace it into a Lottie. So let me just delete this thing, and let's go ahead and just bring in the Lottie and put it right here. Now this is pretty huge, and I can do preview animation. So let's go ahead and style this. Let's go ahead and call this Lottie. Going to make it maybe 50 pixels. Give it a little bit of a background, white background, pretty much what like we did with the other image, with the other icon. Let's go ahead and round corners. Let's go ahead and turn this into position absolute, and put it in the corner. 50 and 50, or okay. So let's preview this. Okay, so what happened here, let me go ahead and remove a little bit of the padding that we have here. What happens now is that this animation just plays once and that's it. It's over. Let's go here into the settings. It basically plays once and it's over, and it's duration of 1 second. I can actually loop this, and let's see what happens now. So now it's just looping, and you can see that we have this animation here that's looping. But maybe something that would be more interesting is that if we only trigger this maybe when we're clicking, right? So let's go ahead and actually, let me go ahead and remove this looping. Let's go ahead and add an animation here. So mouse click, and when we click, we play the Lottie, right? Yeah, one time, preview. Okay, let's go ahead and test this out. So now we have this thing. When we click it, bam, it plays only once. Click, click. Now, in a sense, it doesn't make sense that we don't see anything before, we click, but this was a very, very simple setup where we trigger this animation when we click, and then we have this very nice animation set up right here. Okay, so this was a very, very quick overview of animation. Okay, so I think, I hope I didn't overwhelm you with too much information. You might say, okay, I got it. There's a lot here. What do I do right now? So I hope my goal is not to get you into the kitchen for you to be like miserable. Oh my God, I still don't know how to cook. I want you to be able to enjoy this process and love it, and be able to build beautiful, nice websites, sell them for a lot of money. And my promise to you is this doesn't have to take years. So I want to give you my personal bias recommendation for the best way to fast track your success. We have 5,000 designers who are vouching that this is the best method out there. And this is a very, very exciting week for us because we have just launched the new version, the 3rd edition of the Webflow Masterclass, which is our flagship course. And I want to take a few minutes, I hope that's okay with you, to share what this program is all about and how this can help you using during your Webflow learning journey. So as I said, this week we have launched it after working tirelessly to make sure that this is the best curriculum to make sure that you go from somebody who's just dabbling in Webflow to becoming an actual professional. I just before the stream reviewed how many actual Webflow experts are in the Webflow expert directory that came out of our course, and this is amazing. So this is the most efficient way to do this. We have really worked very hard to make sure we know how many tutorials there are out there to, in the least amount of time and effort from your end, to really grasp these concepts. And we've narrowed it down to basically 12 hours of content. And the way that we do this is we teach you by helping you build, working with you on real world client projects. We have 2 complete website builds that we are sharing the files with you, and you're learning by building and working on these projects, which is the best way to learn by doing, and have expertise. So by the end, that when you finish, you know how long it takes you to build this type of highly customized, really great looking website, so that when you're giving proposals to your clients, you know that you've already have 2 websites, great looking websites under your belt, and you can confidently promise them that you're going to be able to achieve these kinds of results for them. Now, the one thing that I'm most proud about our courses that separates them from any other learning alternative out there is that we have the best coaches, Webflow experts, and support to help you on your journey. We have a community where you can, whenever you get stuck, you can ask questions. We will help you to debug stuff. We will help you how to think about your client requirements and how to solve them, and how to troubleshoot your problems. So this is really, if you're overwhelmed and worried about going on this on your own, there's completely no need to do this on your own. We're here for you, and we want to help you, work with you to do this. We also have a certification program. If you're not just watching the video, but if you we have a certification project where you demonstrate to us your learning, and that you are able to build efficiently using our quality standards. You'll be able to get the certificate and show us that you've learned. We have weekly calls, we have private events for our students, and really, actually, let me share with you what 2 of our students said. Maybe they can say it better than me.
Hey everyone, my name is Eli. I'm a Flux student and community member, and thanks to Rand's courses, I can now officially identify as a freelance designer and developer. And for this video, I really just wanted to share my experience and rave about my experience, really, of how much I love the Flux community, the courses that are available, and how it has really changed my life. I know that sounds so cliche, but truly purchasing the course back in late December 2020 was one of the best things that I've ever done for myself. My life is on a completely different trajectory now, thanks to Rand. Since then, I've able to close a few freelance jobs, increase my income, and all of that. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without Rand's course. Speaking of Rand's course, it's great. It's easy to digest. It's direct to the point, and I can definitely say that in my own experience, after finishing the course, I took the Webflow Masterclass, by the way. After finishing it, I was definitely competent when it comes to using Webflow. But really, the course is just the first step. Once you purchase the course, it unlocks you to a community, a rich community of like-minded people, where you got weekly mastermind meetings with Ren. You get monthly challenges from the community, which gives you great opportunities for exposure, um, um, prizes, and all of that. And most importantly, you've got the community job board, where I actually first got my first ever freelance job, which was amazing. And then if you lock out like I did, you might get featured in one of Rand's YouTube channel, which was such a blessing for my own freelance career. And so if you're considering getting into freelancing, doing web design and development work, I really couldn't emphasize this enough. Go get Rand's courses. It's the best. And get into the community, start getting active, start asking questions. And yeah, you could turn your life around in in just a matter of a few months. Rand, thanks so much for everything. More power to you and your team.
Hi, my name is Linda. I used to be a graphic designer and did some web design in Figma, but thanks to the courses of Flux Academy, I'm now able to transform my sketches to Figma to Webflow, and I'm very grateful for that because it means more business. I don't have to send my clients to developers. I can really keep all the design making and decisions in own hands. So yeah, I'm very happy with it. And I even had my first 10K client, Webflow client. So very happy, and I expect to have loads of them this year. Okay, bye.
All right. So if you're asking yourself, okay, so how much is it? Well, I went to a full-on design school. It's nothing close to that. But also everything else online that has this kind of, personalized feedback from coaches like us costs at least $7,000. But our Flux courses are priced at $695. And just because we have launched this new edition, this week we're actually having a promo of you can get the course for $500, even I think a few dollars less than that, until Friday end of day. So that's like 24 hours or so, depending on when you're seeing this, which is a phenomenal opportunity. So if you haven't jumped into it yet, I highly encourage you to do that. Also, all of our courses come with 30-day money back guarantee. So if you're not happy for whatever reason, no worries at all. We trust that you will love our course, and we don't want you to have any kind of like fears. So if this isn't a good fit for you, we're going to refund your money. Don't let that kind of like, what if it's not working out for me, be a concern for you. Now, if you're telling yourself right now, oh, sounds great, but I'm very busy right now. I can't afford this. I'm not really talented. This will not work where I live. Look, I just want to tell you that first of all, you'll always find reasons not to change. And we have seen this, the results for a lot of different people from all around the world that were able to do this in relatively short time, as you've been able to hear from our students before. And what I really want you to consider with yourself is like, what's actually the cost of not doing this? What is actually the cost of continuing on your YouTube journey of trying to figure this out on your own, and maybe not taking a client because you're not sure you can actually deliver, and then maybe it takes you double the time that it could have taken you to complete the project? How much profit would you lose just because you're working too slow? So consider the cost of that in both time and money, and then think whether this is worth your cost. And my gut feeling is it's definitely worth the cost. So hopefully you'll consider the Webflow Masterclass. As I said, really great deal until Friday. And with that, I think we can dive into a little bit of a Q&A. Probably not a lot because I'm super tired. It's very late here in Israel, but let's give this a try a little bit. Let me just open up the chat here so I can take up with your comments. All right, so Nick, Ron, would you say Webflow is as easy as learning as Photoshop? First of all, I don't know that Photoshop is easy to learn. I've spent years trying to learn Photoshop, and to this day, there are a lot of color technique and hair cutting techniques that are very, very difficult in Photoshop. So I wouldn't say Photoshop is easy. The only thing I would say is that I think it's not harder, but it's a different part in your brain. Thinking like a developer, I also think this is a creative effort, but it's just in a different part of the brain. So I don't think it's more difficult. I just think that maybe this side of your brain might be not as strong as your kind of like visual side so far, but with a little bit of practice, I think it shouldn't be difficult. So question from Anna, is the course from somebody who learned front end and has built several simple pages? I think that if you already know the concepts of front end, then this should be pretty easy for you. Then I think what you'll benefit from this course is understanding the processes, understanding, the interaction work, understanding, how to work with the CMS, how to deliver to your clients. So I still think you'll get a lot from it, even if you have the basic fundamentals of a front end. So this is great. So I saw there were a few questions about Webflow e-commerce, about where it's best used, where it's limited. This is a big discussion. E-commerce is a very complex topic with lots of features. And it's going to take a while to start really comparing the details. But I will say that currently, Webflow's e-commerce is probably suited for rather small direct-to-consumer brands that don't have big inventory, big requirements in terms of features, in terms of shipping mechanism, in terms of payment plans and stuff like that. So if it's a small brand that maybe sells like 3 to 5 products, maybe in the US, then maybe Webflow can be a good fit, Webflow e-commerce. If not, maybe you need to consider Shopify. And there are a few alternatives to, perhaps building with Webflow and then exporting to Shopify or something like this. Other than that, like for big, important e-commerce websites, I don't know that I would run them on Webflow at the moment. All right, one more question from Nick. Do you think Webflow will evolve to a standard where it can build everything? So what I think is this. I think Webflow has done phenomenal job in developing UI for building front end, which they've done better than everybody else. But as I just said about e-commerce, different types of websites, maybe like e-commerce or then marketplaces or other kind of like use cases, have so many features that it's going to be very hard, I think, for Webflow to compete with businesses like Shopify, whose sole purpose is to develop features for that specific use case. So what I think is, or hope, is that at the end of the day, Webflow is going to be the kind of the front end, the design tool, and then you'll be able to integrate the back end with other services. Hopefully, I would love if there would be like a proper Webflow Shopify integration or something else. But that's where I hope Webflow is going for. I don't really know what their plans is. By the way, Webflow Masterclass teaches everything about Webflow. Are there any other courses to supplement it? It does take you from beginner to a competent designer that can build pretty much everything. We don't dive too deep into e-commerce for the reasons that I've just mentioned, just because right now Webflow's e-commerce is not super developed, and we didn't want to tackle the whole Webflow to Shopify because this integration is not working well. And we're separately considering an e-commerce course that's not specifically about Webflow, but this course is basically a standalone and will help you to basically build most Webflow website that you need. If you have a concern about a specific type of website, feel free to send this to us on our website, to our support, and we'll help you figure out whether you'll be able to do this or not. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up for today. My voice is starting to feel a little bit worn out. Thank you so much for staying out throughout this whole workshop. I can see that there's still a big bunch of you here, and I appreciate you staying all the way through the end and hanging out with me. And I hope this wasn't too overwhelming and you had a good time and you learned a thing or two. Hope to see you with us in the Webflow Masterclass. And if not, I'll see you here on YouTube in the next stream or video. Peace out.